Howdy folks, Sabre here. Welcome back to the channel. I'm just kidding, guys. You are looking at it. That's right. The air-to-ground monster. The Beast. The FJ-4B VMF 232. That's right. The one and the only jet in the game that has guided air-to-ground missiles. Now obviously they are manually guided, but nonetheless, oops, I forgot to load the missiles. My bad. So let's load them up real quick, and I need more belts? Yeah, get me more. I can't purchase more. Lol, War Thunder's trolling me today. Anyway, and I have auto resupply on. Whatever. Anyway, the AGM-12B bullpup rockets, I don't know if this has anything to do with the fact that the dev team's that English is the dev team's second language, but they seem to call unguided rockets missiles and guided missiles or unguided missiles rockets. They get them backwards. I don't know why. But just to deviate a little, I saw this documentary on the F-86 Sabre not too long ago. I forget its exact name. I'll link it in the description below. But they were talking about how the F-86 Sabre in Australia used a Canberra engine, that it was modified to carry a Canberra engine. And I was like, really? So I decided to look at the Canberra's engine because I was like, it's a big engine. Then I was like, oh, size is misleading once you look at the X-ray. 3,100 kilograms of thrust, and it only weighs 800 kilograms. And you compare that with the F-86's engine, and it's 1,150 kilograms and produces 2,600 kilograms of thrust. So 500 extra kilograms of thrust. And they noted that while its top speed wasn't that much higher, it accelerated like a boss. Well, they didn't call it a boss, but you know what I mean. Yeah, that's crazy. But, yeah. Anyhow, so without further ado, let's get into it. So, oh, and I forgot to mention that by the time you watch this video, if my little special secret sources are to be believed, that in a near update, you will no longer be able to do what I did throughout the whole video. That is to launch a missile, hold U down, which is the camera chase or weapon chase camera key by default, and just guide your missile like a TV guide. Because historically, these were not TV-guided missiles. I guess you could say they were like the Fritz X in a sort of way. Or perhaps, what was that German missile called? The X4 missile? That was like a wire-guided air-to-air missile. Then again, these aren't air-to-air missiles. I mean, I have in a custom battle, like, fired these missiles from afar at an aircraft, but the problem is, number one, they have to be a large aircraft, and they have to be going in a perfect straight line. Anyhow, going back to the, oh my gosh, I almost called it the X4 missile. The bullpup, that's easier to remember. The bullpup missiles, you notice how I was kind of treating them like Tinny Tims. That's because, as you know, there's no way to turn off the enemy markers and leave only the allied markers in a replay. I don't know why, so... And I want you to be able to distinguish friend from foe, at least friend from invisible foe, that is. Never mind, that sounded weird. So I just leave the markers on anyway. And so, when I'm scanning the battlefield, there's so much to scan, and I don't have those markers over their heads like in a real battle, only in a replay. So you have a lot to scan. And when you turn them off, which I do later in the video, you will notice it can be difficult sometimes to spot a vehicle that's been holding still. Or sometimes ones that are on the move when you're trying to focus on one area of the battlefield when you should be looking on another part of the battlefield. You can't always be right 100% of the time. But my theory is that even if they remove... Sorry, I'm jumping back to the missile. Even if they remove, I guess you could say, the TV-guided feature, that's... I hate to say it, it's not going to solve the problem 100%. Sure, you'll nullify their ability to shoot from a great distance away because you'll have reduced visibility, and you would especially have a hard time engaging targets on the move. You can still treat them like Tinny Tims, or Tiny Ivans, or Tiny Toras. I like that name, by the way, the Tiny Tora. It's so fitting for that Japanese unguided rocket. But, and I appreciate that they're making the effort to try to balance these missiles out. And I have to admit, that's a great idea, assuming they actually do it. You know, remove the TV guide feature. But it kind of... Then at the same time, you don't really get to choose your... I was going to say you could just leave that TV guide in air arcade battles or just standard ARB battles, but then at the same time, in regards to the tank arcade, you can't really choose your loadout, let alone your aircraft. Like, I don't even think this aircraft would be available in tank arcade, because the way it works is you destroy a certain amount of tanks, you destroy you get a certain amount of assists, and you capture some zones. I forget the exact number of zones you have to cap, and you get enough points to spawn in an aircraft for 60 seconds. The problem is that number one, you cannot choose your loadout. Like, you can't choose if you want bombs or rockets or anything in between. And number one, number two, you especially cannot choose your aircraft. So there's that. And to deviate a little, I'm so sorry, what's his name? Oh gosh. Yeah, it was the same guy. Shevil Leftman. Sorry if I said your name wrong. I have to admit, I'm always annoyed when I get killed by the same guy twice. And it's especially annoying in Tank RB because there's no markers. Like, I had no idea I was engaging the same guy. I just assumed it was just an ordinary Leopard 1 just camping on the hill, on Sniper Hill. But I had no idea that was the same guy I had got early in the game. And given that I get annoyed when I get destroyed by the same guy twice, it makes me feel bad that I got him twice, but hey, no markers, you never know. Like, just the other day I was playing my Leopard 2A4, and somebody from Fly's Discord, I forgot his name, forgive me, I'll put a little annotation on the screen, and he was like, "Hey, Sabre," and I was like, "Hi," and he's like, "What are you driving?" And I was like, "Oh, a Leopard 2A, I mean not a Leopard 2A4, an M1, excuse me. He was in the Leopard 2A4, and so I'm on the Rhineland, and I'm camping in a little hiding spot. I get one tank, and then another tank comes along and gets my breach. And I was like, no. And I'm trying to back up. I pop smoke. My teammate tries to help, but he can't do anything fast enough. You gotta hate that when your teammate's like, I'll save you, and then he just gets destroyed. I'm like, oh my gosh. Anyway, I get destroyed, and I realize it was the same guy that said hello to me earlier, and I was like, oof. And he's like, oh crap. Sorry, Sabre. And I was like, it's alright, you didn't know. Ay. But, I guess, going back to the missiles, assuming they actually do remove, you know, the TV guide, that means you would have to get up close and personal. Because sure, you may have the tracer, but it gets hard to see the farther away the missile goes. I don't know. But then, SPAA would especially be a good counter to this. And quite frankly, when I got this jet, I knew that the missiles would not be final, like they could possibly get nerfed. So I thought to myself, hey, if that isn't the case, whether they get nerfed or not, like I just did there, just treat them like Tinny Tims. And that's what I've been doing ever since. Like, if I can't see the target real well, or if I'm just too close to try to use the TV guide, just launch the missile and just let it go. Just let it go its own path. Go straight to the target. So anyway, I think I've covered the full pub for a decent amount of time. I think I've mentioned all that there is to mention, but mark my words. I'm pretty sure that the missile camera will be removed. It just makes sense, because it's not a TV guide. And if they do, honestly, I think that's okay. Because at least when I play this, I'm just going to treat it like a unguided rocket, like a Tinny Tim. Even so, the opposite faction, you know, like Germany, Russia, and Japan, and the know-how, they still have the upper hand. And on top of that, I didn't want you to see that. To deviate a little, one thing you cannot see in replays is when your pilot blacks out. Like, you know, the red effect or the black effect or whatever it's called. But apparently I did not have my pilot skills fully upgraded like I thought I did. So I was like, I found out after the battle and I was like, whoops, and boom. I was not expecting that. Through smoke, 2 tanks, an XM1 and a Sheridan. I was like, oh my gosh. And I could have got the other XM1 you saw there, but I didn't want to risk team killing any of our allied tanks, because I've done that before where I was in my Arado. I was trying to bomb an M1 Abrams, and the bomb bounced off a rock and fell right next to a Leopard 2K, and I was like, no! And then it goes, friendly kill, negative 5,000 lions. And I was like, well, at least the TK fine was lenient, but I still felt bad. I guess it could tell it was an accident, I don't know. But it still felt bad, man. It always feels bad when you accidentally team kill your teammate. Like, it's one thing if it's artillery, because in a way it's kind of their own fault. Sometimes, but not always, because they often drive into it. But at the same time, you can't always tell if artillery's striking an area. Especially if it's friendly artillery. And what I mean by that is like, let's say somebody set an artillery strike on Bravo. And you're outside of Bravo. There's no radio call out to say, hey, there's an artillery strike going on in Bravo. Stay clear. You just drive into Bravo, la-di-da-di-da, and don't notice that anything's wrong until the artillery comes raining down, and by then, it's either, like, let's say you're a light vehicle. You often don't have time to get out of there before the artillery starts raining on your head. And then you go kaboom. Like, and I've seen that myself. Like, I was in my M163 Badis on, not Ardennes, it's the large version of Ardennes, but I can't remember how you pronounce it. Anyhow, I drive into there, I set fire to a T-64's engine, and then a Centurion, I mean not a Centurion, a Chieftain comes and finishes him off. So I'm waiting there on the cap point. I capture Alpha, and I kid you not, the moment I finish capping Alpha, oh, my 163 blows up to a Type 90's artillery. So I got team killed by artillery. And of course I was laughing because I knew, hey, that's okay. I have enough spawn points to get in another vehicle. And he was like, sorry mod, please don't ban me. And I was like, hey man, it's no problem. I got to go in my plane. And this was before the FJ-4B bullpup was added. So I think I was just going to go in like my Sky Raider or my Bearcat because I didn't have enough spawn points for my Sabre. And this is before they kind of reduced the spawn costs for 9.0 jets. Now they're, interestingly enough, if you have a 10.0 vehicle in your lineup, like an M1 Abrams or a Leopard 2A4, then you could fly out, let's say, the F-86 with no bombs or rockets for the same cost as an F-8F Bearcat. Again, with no bombs or rockets. I think that was a fabulous idea. Because honestly, depending on your combat situation, it's often not a good idea to just take a prop into battle unless it's a really good prop, like a Bearcat or a D-13 or an LA-9. Because you can either get wrecked by other jets or by the pesky self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicles. And yeah, the jets are just helpful because although you can still get wiped occasionally by the AA, you can still go toe-to-toe with the enemy jets. Now, I've mentioned this before, I'm certain, but I'll mention it anyway. I think the radar, and Fly has mentioned this too, I honestly would think that it would be a good idea to make the radar on an anti-aircraft vehicle either a power-up or, in my honest opinion, make it to where, like, friendly markers are limited. Like, I recall that people were outraged when they initially started that if you were in a radar-equipped anti-aircraft vehicle, that you couldn't see any markers. You couldn't distinguish friend from foe unless you did the radar. People didn't like that. What if, instead, you could have varying spawn points for the aircraft? Like, instead of having just one spawn point, like let's say you're on Poland, and you spawn in the east. Instead of spawning on that one center spawn, you could spawn in the northeast or the southeast. You have a variety of approaches to choose from. For one thing, that could cut back on the aircraft spawn camping, which thankfully has not been too much of a problem lately that I've observed. Not anybody on my team or the enemy team that I have seen lately has done that. So that's one idea. And then with the anti-air, maybe make it to where like your detection for the radar is shorter. Like they have to be closer for you to detect them on radar. And on top of that, you also have to wait for an allied vehicle to get close before you can say, okay, this is a friendly. Maybe so an anti-aircraft player can think twice before firing on the first aircraft he sees. Now, they'll still be effective vehicles to protect the battlefield against aircraft, but at least some incoming aircraft and grounded strikers can have a chance. And it's especially annoying when you're in a dogfight with an enemy fighter and they just run to their nearest anti-air defense. Now, sure, that is realistic, and I do it myself, but I would certainly like to have a chance of properly dogfighting rather than just be out of the blue, just exploded by invisible tracers. That's another thing I really think needs to be fixed ASAP. Regardless if it's a client issue or a server issue. Now, I've heard, I'm a little on the fence on this, and what I mean is that some of my friends have said it's a client-side issue, others say it's a server-side issue. Let me be honest, I don't know which is at fault. But what I do know is, it is annoying when you're flying and then you just explode, and 5 seconds later, oh, there are the tracers. They're 5 seconds late. Exaggeration intended. But, this is the part where I tried to use my missile as an anti-air missile, which I'll probably... And that's another thing I wanted to mention. I thought about making like a new mini-series called Bite-Sized War Thunder. And what that is like, it will most likely be a little complication of videos I have that are just a bit too short for a feature-length video. Like me using the bullpups as anti-air missiles, or me using the Packwagon against top-tier tanks. Something like that, to where I can just use those videos, and just put them together in one big video, but separated by brief pauses. So you can know, like, here's video 1, then there's video 2, and so on. So the last thing I want to discuss in this video before we conclude for today is helicopters. Oh yeah, I am super excited for the helicopters to be released. But one thing that's been on my mind, and I'm really curious about this, is we've seen on the dev server, or not the dev, the helicopter, that ATGM, not the dev server, the Gamescom footage that anti-aircraft vehicles, if they can spot the helicopters in time, that is, can really hold their own against helicopters. And presumably a tank could use their roof machine guns or even their main guns to take out a helicopter. It's particularly at range since they're slow and they're big. Well, when I say slow, I mean like slow, like you have to be stable in order to get your weapons on target. But what has me curious is, how are they going to fare against aircraft? Because even propeller-driven fighters like the 109s, 190s, Yak-9s, P-51s, and the know-how, they can easily intercept a helicopter. At least, I would assume they would most likely be able to. But we'll just have to wait and see on that. I'm certainly curious as to how they'll fare against aircraft, especially jet fighters, because propeller-driven fighters are just best-case scenario. Because some of us use props in top-tier tank battles, like some use Thunderbolts, some use Bearcats, some use P-51s. Props have their role on the battlefield. Oh yeah, and I especially myself like to use the Sky Raiders. So in the end, we'll just have to wait and see what the dev server will hold, and the helicopter CBT to follow. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to 1.81. I'm especially curious to try out the T-80 tank, because I like the T-64, but I just need a good reverse gear and good mobility. But that's a topic for a future video. But anyway, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are enjoying the video so far. If you do, be sure to leave a like and a comment. It really helps out a lot. Appreciate all your support. Hope you have a great day, and until next time, peace out.